Are vinyl pressing plants finally getting caught up? That reissue you've been waiting on going to land in your local store soon? I'll give you my opinion on these questions and more in this episode of Talking About Records. My name is G.I. Sanders from NTX Vinyl, a small chain of independent record shops in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. If you're not local but you are in the U.S., you can shop online at ntxvinyl.com, and would love it if you'd subscribe to our channel here on YouTube. Follow us across social media on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at NTX Vinyl. Let's talk about the current state of pressing plants and the vinyl industry in general. It is January 2023. And in my opinion, I think this year has a great outlook. Like the signs that I'm seeing over the past year, but especially the past few months, I'm very optimistic about the state of the industry in regards to getting caught up. And here's what I mean by that. If you go back just a couple years, pre-COVID, albums were readily available. And that's because of a couple things. One, there were not near as many people collecting. Like that's just the facts, right? Supply and demand. There were not as many people buying records in the market. So pressing plants that were running off, 1,000 copies or something, or a couple thousand copies, those just lasted longer because there weren't as many people collecting, right? Then COVID hit and you had a huge influx of interest and new collectors entering into the market. And at the same time, you had pressing plants having to shut down temporarily, having a shortage of labor, having shortage of materials, and all of that created an incredible backlog across the board as it pertains to new vinyl production. Now, over the past year, we've seen signs that that's starting to improve and it's starting to get better. And then, like I mentioned, just in the last couple months of 2022, is when things have really started to look good. What I mean by that is albums that have been out of print or still in print but not available finally have started to come back into stores and become available at normal retail prices. I'm not talking about secondary market, obviously, because that's always the case. There's always a secondary market. There's always someone who wants to buy a record low, sell a record high, right? Whether it's on eBay or Discogs or Facebook for that matter, right? But the reality is now is that we're seeing things stabilize, and that's the most exciting part to me. And it's one of the conversations I've had a lot with other people I deal with, whether it be people I work with in the industry, customers, friends, those type of other collectors, obviously, thinking about the long-term projection of the vinyl record industry. Like, is this thing going to sustain? And the most exciting part to me is that it's starting to level off a little bit. You go back a year or two, certainly, and there was this huge spike of interest, of sales, of demand. And while there's still a lot of that going on, it's not this massive spike anymore. It's starting to level off a little bit. And in my opinion, that's a great thing because it enables more accessibility for people who are collecting or who want to collect because they can actually buy the albums they want. And then for stores, it's all about having some consistency, right? Like that was the hard part looking back a year or two is things were like this because you never knew if you could get an album in stock. You were lucky sometimes if you got any quantity of an album you wanted to stock in your store. Now we're starting to see signs. As a store owner, I'm starting to see signs that, man, this thing's stabilizing a little bit. Like these big titles that typically were gone in minutes or hours are now lasting days or weeks, right? And that's a huge, huge plus for someone who owns a record store because we're talking about titles that a lot of people want. We're talking about titles like Smashing Pumpkins, not only Gish, but also Pisces Iscariot, also Adore, Siamese Dream was also available for a brief period, but that's obviously their most popular title, so it sold out quick. You've got newer stuff like Greta Van Fleet. You have the Limp Bizkit title. You've got stuff like Beck and Sea Change. So again, just a couple examples in the rock genre that I deal with mostly, but it's all across the board. I'm seeing it in jazz. I'm seeing it in hip hop. Pretty much everywhere you look, you're starting to see an influx of inventory that's actually available. And I'm not saying it's going to stay available forever, because that's not how vinyl works, but at least it's not sold out in minutes or hours. It's lasting days or weeks. And as things progress, as more pressing plants continue to increase their capacity, as more pressing plants come online and get production going, all of these things are going to start to stabilize. And for me as a business owner, stability is the most important thing in trying to figure out how to do this long term, right? So I get a lot of questions about this, and I want to address a couple of them. The first thing is the difference between something that is out of print versus just not available. So when an artist or a label commissions to have a certain number of records pressed, doesn't matter if it's a new album or a reissue necessarily, it all comes down to paperwork, right? Like there is a contract that is cut between the artist and the label typically has the ability to define, or they negotiate the ability, hey, we have the option to press up to 5,000 records, just as an example number. It's pretty decent pressing. 5,000 is a lot of records. You got to be a pretty established artist to have the confidence, and the label has to have confidence in that artist to press 5,000 records, because records are not CDs. They don't cost pennies. I don't care if you're the biggest label, distributor, pressing plant, big box store in the world. You're not paying pennies for records. The materials themselves and the labor that go into making them cost money. I don't. Maybe that's $7-10 a record, or $12 to $15 a record. Again, the more you buy, the price point lessons per item. What I'm getting at is that labels will make that deal on paper with the artist and say, hey, we can press up to 5,000. They don't have to do it all at once. They can choose just to press 1,000 for the release day. Let's say it's a new release. And then maybe that sells out. So they're going to get back in line and, next time, let's go ahead and press the other 4,000 now, or maybe we just press 1,000 more. And the biggest question I get when I tell people this scenario is, why wouldn't they just press all 5,000? Well, there's a couple reasons. One is, like I mentioned, the cost up front. There's significant risk. If they press 5,000 and that artist doesn't catch on like they hope, maybe it's a legacy artist and they assumed that they were going to sell through, many thousand copies of this, but maybe it's only sold a couple hundred, then they're sitting on thousands of records that they've spent money on already. That money's already been spent. Then you have to take into consideration the storage. Like, where do these thousands of records go that are going to take now maybe years to sell because they realize they overpressed it? They pressed too many in some people's opinions. And now they've got to figure out, okay, we've got to discount these. We've got to move these around to different distributors that sell kind of overstock stuff, which is essentially when there's too many of an item, then overstock distributors will get those and discount them and sell them to record stores in bulk, right? So there's a lot of different scenarios at play here, but the reality is that the artist and the label together are usually taking some sort of gamble, because no one really knows. You can go to Spotify or go to the Billboard charts and see who's selling the most in regards to streaming or downloads, but how does that correlate to a physical product that's going to cost $20, $25, $30? It's not always apples to apples. So you can't always look at the number of streams of an artist and be guaranteed that, oh, they're going to sell a ton of vinyl records because they have lots of people listening to them on Spotify and Apple Music or wherever else. Like, that doesn't always work. It's an indicator. It's a sign that you use, but it's not a sure thing, right? So that's one thing to keep in mind in regards to why an artist or a record label wouldn't press just many thousands up front, because there's a huge upfront cost, and then there's obviously a gamble with that. So let's look at the other scenario. Let's say that a label cuts a deal with an artist and they say, hey, we're going to press we have the ability to press 5,000 of this. We're very confident because demand has been built up for so long over the last couple of years. Good example would be like Smashing Pumpkins, Tyler's, or something like a legacy artist where you know there's a built-in fan base and you know demand is huge, right? Because people haven't been able to buy these albums in a year or 2 or 3, right? So they press 5,000. Guess what? That pressing then is gone. Like, you're not going to see it again until the label and the artist get together and essentially renew that contract or add more quantity to that contract. So they may do an addendum to that contract and say, hey, we'll give you the ability to press another 5,000, or maybe this time they'll up it to 10,000. Again, that doesn't mean they're going to press them all at once because that's too big of a gamble. That's too much of expense. But at least then they have the ability to. That entire scenario I'm describing, that's a title that is in print, right? When it goes out of print, when those first 5,000 sell out, it's essentially out of print until they renegotiate that contract or cut a new contract, right? So there are certainly titles right now, and there have been, and there always will be titles that are in print, but that doesn't mean they're available because the allotment has sold out. And the label and the artist are back waiting in line at the pressing plant to get more quantity pressed, right? And these days, lines are much shorter, which is great. You go back a year or two mid-COVID and lines were hellacious. You were talking about 8, 12, 15 months to get a record press. That number is reducing. It's substantially, just again, over the last 6 months, I've seen the ability to get a record press drop from 8 months to 6 months to 5 months, right? And so that's super exciting, especially for someone who owns a label and presses records in addition to a store, right? So that's just something to keep in mind. I get asked that all the time of like, if something's still in print, why can't I buy it? Well, it's in print because the label has the ability to print more contractually, but that doesn't mean they actually have them in hand. They've got to go through the process. And just like I always mention, like this is not a quick thing. Regardless if the lines are shorter, they've still got to go through and repress the jackets at a pressing plant. People have to approve test pressings if they need new stampers. There's a lot that goes into producing a record. It's just not hitting a button and spitting out more and having them the next day. Like you're talking about months of planning and process and QA to make sure things are going properly as far as the printing and the sound and everything that goes into it, right? So there's a whole process. So I always get a lot of questions about, the difference between something that's in print or out of print or being reissued, what it may be. And so those are some of the discussions that I wanted to, paint some clarity around. So to answer the question at the top, is an album that you've been waiting for going to be reissued now that pressing plants are starting to normalize and supply and demand are starting to get more in balance? Nobody really knows. Like the biggest question I get all the time, I get messages, emails, phone calls of, hey, when's this album getting repressed? And I am being completely transparent and forward with you. Record stores have no freaking clue. Not only that, distributors really don't have a clue. Like I work with all of the major distributors in the US, just like every major record store does. And they'll tell you firsthand that they don't even know what they're getting in their warehouses until typically a couple days in advance. Now there's someone that knows, but the people who are dealing with stores as far as fulfillment and inventory, like they do not get a heads up. I can shoot a list over to all of my reps and all my distributors right now of, hey, do you know when any of these are coming? And the answer is, we got no clue. Like they don't know either. They know maybe a week out, couple days out, like that's when it becomes available. And I think the reason for that's quite obvious. Like with the way information travels these days, like the minute anybody gets wind that a big title's coming, like that information is gonna leak out right away, and then you're gonna have a complete S show on your hands because you're gonna have stores and customers all clamoring to figure out when is it coming, right? And for a new release that's got a date published in advance, maybe usually months out, like that's a different story. But I'm talking about reissues of stuff that again are reprint, are in print and just getting a new reissue or a new pressing, right? So we don't know when things are coming. That's the other big question that I get asked. So is an album going to get reissued that you've been waiting on? Well, there's a couple things you can look at, and I've kind of already alluded to them, is like, has it been reissued recently? Like chances are, if you've seen it available in stores recently, like let's say in the last couple months, and now it's hard to find, there's a pretty good chance there will be another pressing. Again, unless it's out of print and they got to go back and renegotiate a contract. A good example of this would be Alice in Chains' Dirt, which if you go back a year or two, went completely off the face of the earth. Not only did Alice in Chains' Dirt did, but so did Unplugged and so did Jarfly's Sap, right? All of those went off the radar, and the reason why they did that is because the deal that Alice in Chains or their label Columbia had with Music on Vinyl, which was the reissue label that was releasing them, the contract expired, from what I was told, which means those were no longer in print. So the band and the label had to go back and renegotiate and say, hey, are we going to continue to reissue these with Music on Vinyl, or do we want to put them out just through traditional channels versus going through that unique label scenario? They chose to just go through the traditional channels, which means Columbia put it out themselves, Columbia Sony, and Dirt, for example, now is readily available because they probably commissioned a much higher number. And my gut says Unplugged and Jarfly Sap, those will come as well. They didn't do them all at once. But in a similar fashion, they will all become available again. So the key word here is patience. So that's the other thing to look at, which you can point to that for Smashing Pumpkins or Alice in Chains, or again, just examples that I use because they're top of mind for me. But if you're seeing an artist, and part of their catalog is getting reissued, like you see one or two albums come back in, there's a pretty good chance that the other ones may come back. Now, again, it's not always a chance, but I've seen it happen time and time again. And you can go look right now, and you can find almost complete catalogs and discographies of artists like Foo Fighters or Tom Petty, or that are almost every album from them is available right now and in print, and you can purchase it. Go back 6, 12, 18 months. That was not even the case at all. That you were lucky if there was even a couple out of, artists like that have 10, 12, 15 albums available and readily available on vinyl. Like it was far and few between. And so again, those are the signs that are really, really encouraging as a record store owner, because you're seeing pressing plants catch up, capacity is getting caught up. We're completely, I guess, past the worker shortages and the supply chain issues and all that. All of that seems to be getting ironed out, thankfully, and we're coming back to somewhat a normal, right? And that's what's creating now this environment of stability where, hey, as a consumer, you can actually buy the albums you want. And that's the most important thing. And honestly, the flip side of that is it's the most frustrating thing for me, and I'm sure every other record store owner, when people are continually clamoring for an album that they saw available recently, but now it's gone. It's like, and I tell people all the time, it's like, I can't get any more. It's not that I don't want to sell you a copy of this album. It's like I physically can't get it, because it's not available anymore, or because other record stores bought it all up before me. That's definitely a thing too. Like every record store has the choice of what albums they want to stock, and some record stores can go big and they can buy hundreds and hundreds of copies of a certain title. I don't do that. The most copies I ever buy of a certain title, I mean, maybe 50, I think, or maybe a little more than that. And that's like the hottest title that I'm just like, you know what, I have complete confidence I can sell all these over the course of many months. So I have no issue making that investment up front, right? So there's definitely a game, and there's a strategy from the record store standpoint of figuring out, what's being repressed, what's still in print or out of print, how many you want to buy. And then there's definitely a conversation around new vinyl and a strategy from a consumer standpoint, and that's evolving a lot. And I got that question recently. Someone was like, "Well, how do you buy new record? Or like, how do you buy used records, and how do you buy new records?" And I told them it's like two completely different things. I think it was actually a comment on YouTube that alluded to it from a previous video. And it got me thinking, it's like these days, there is a strategy of buying new vinyl if you're really set on collecting specific things. Like there's a lot of, I guess I'll say, more passive collectors where they'll go in their local record store or maybe shop online a little bit, and they'll pick up things as they see them if they're available. That's totally normal. That's a normal shopping experience. There's a whole nother realm of collectors that are much more specific, and they are tracking exactly when things get released and when things get reissued and how many copies are pressed, if that information is available. And for those people, there's a strategy, because again, you're trying to make sure you can get something right away before it goes out of print again, because you don't want to be patient. And so you got to really have your eye on the ball and be watching newsletters and emails from stores of when things come back in stock. You can set up notifications from some. Certainly there's social media groups that you can depend on to notify you of when things become available. All that stuff takes time. It all takes effort, and really you got to want to put in that time and effort if you want to succeed in getting the exact titles you want as soon as they're available at the best price, right? If you're not so specific, well, things are really good for you, because there's a lot of titles, a lot of catalog titles, reissues that are coming back available now. And again, that's the kind of the headline here, is that things are getting back to normal. It's going to get easier for everybody to collect new records, which is amazing, because there's so many records out there that people are clamoring for and that stores want to sell. And it's been a struggle for the last couple years to be able to find that balance, but it's starting to happen now. I'm very optimistic about it, and I can tell you over the last few months, especially over the holidays, like demand is still very high. Foot traffic through local stores, online purchases, purchasing through online sales and like auctions and just straight sales through Discogs. All of that stuff is very, very active. There's still a lot of people buying. It's not the craze that it was mid-COVID, but that's okay. We don't have to have that to sustain long term. I'm looking for stability. I'm looking for this niche, because let's be honest, it's a niche. Vinyl records are a niche. It's not going to take over the music industry, but it is the clear front runner as far as a predominant physical format moving forward. And that's what excites me, because it's a format I love. So I'm hoping to be able to do this for a long time. So that's my thoughts on the current state of the vinyl industry and pressing plants and reissues versus versus being in print or out of print. So I'd love, if you have any questions, I'd love to field them. Obviously, you can hit it in the comments. You can also get me anytime via email, orders@ntxvinyl.com. We'll go straight to me, and we'll go from there. So thanks for tuning in. I hope this was educational. If you are curious about this type of thing, we'll be back soon with another episode of Talking About Records. My name is G.I. Sanders, and we'll see you soon.